5 minutes into the time where we told folk we were going to be back. But as we kind of got our technical things worked out, we are here this wonderful Sabbath afternoon, April 18, 2020.
Brother.
We want
That's
to
right.
welcome those of you that may be watching and joining us right now. What I'm going to do, gentlemen, just before we get going, I'm going to go to my page, my Facebook page, to make sure that this is broadcasting not just to me only, but that all of our friends out in Facebook world can actually see this every now and then. It has the habit of just going directly to private. And nope, it looks like we are live on my page. So you can go to my page and you can see what we look like there, and then you can share that on your various pages if you like. All right, we've got with us, as we did a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Roger Wade. He is ministries director, church ministries director for the Mid-America Union. We've got Dr. Dion Henry is with us. He is pastoring the Beacon of Light, Beacon of Hope, Beacon of Light.
Beacon Light, baby. Beacon Light.
Beacon Light
Yeah.
Church there in Kansas City, right? Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We've got a little comment there, Dion. You'll be happy to see that. Mackie
that?
Rucker says,
Rucker.
he says, nice to see my old roommates. What up, Mac?
Yes, sir.
Good to have you join us this afternoon. All right, Dion, what are we doing today, Doc? Dr. Henry.
Listen. Look, we had a great conversation 2 weeks ago, and our friend Roger Wade, the Lord has blessed him mightily. Had wonderful comments the last meeting, and agreed to come on again. And I just praise God for his friendship and what he's doing. But we're talking about the church in these times, and in the last couple of months, our church has changed drastically.
Yes, it has.
Right now, we are learning to do things that we didn't really have to do before, but now we have to do it because we want to reach the people. And I'm just thinking that this coronavirus, this COVID-19, I think what it has done in our society, it has given us a wake-up call. And then for the church, I think this is a time to really reflect on what is important and how can we be effective, not just during this pandemic, but onward. And so just bringing in different people in different sectors of the work to talk about that. What can we do that can be a little bit more effective? There's certain things that we can do. And let's just be honest, as we're going through this pandemic, I'm recognizing that there are some things that we were doing that might not be that important, And so just to talk about that and get the perspective, and again, we have Pastor Roger Wade, who serves in the Mid-America Union, doing a fabulous job. Help me out. We praise God for your blessing to me and my ministry. But he has both sides of this, Pastor Paul. I mean, he was a pastor in one of in one of our prestigious churches there in New York, and so he has been there on the ground floor, so he knows ministry from that perspective. And then going to the different areas of the church, Tennessee and some other areas there, and now being he was in the conference level, and now at the union level. And so just getting a perspective from him, what are some things that you think would be, and Pastor Paul, of course, you'll chime in, I'll chime in, but what are some things that you think we need to really look at so that we can be more effective?
Wow. Thanks so much for being here, guys. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. I want you to know I was sheltering at home quietly, and you'll drag me out here.
Dragged you all the way out to the living room,
I have all the way out to the living room. I have to be honest with you. This time has forced me personally as a leader to. I kind of miss the front lines in terms of being the pastor at a local church. but I'm glad where I am. I'm able to see things from a higher level, a top level, and this helps me to be as supportive to as many pastors out there, whether it's preaching, whether it's providing resources, whether it's just giving prayer, checking in on them. It helps me to use my pastor's heart, as my president shared, to share with all these leaders who are now thrust into the fire, like the three Hebrew boys. Literally. When you read the story of Daniel 3, all you do is you hear the potential of the fire. You hear about the power of the fire. Here I am preaching, and all of a sudden you're thrown into the fire, and we're just so glad that God is with us in this fire. So as churches now think about what's their best way to meet the needs of not only their members but their community, it is a challenging time for a lot of leaders.
Yeah, yeah. A challenging time, and I think it's also a time for us to, reflect on the church. Just for me, as I look at my church and I look at what we're doing now, I say to myself, man, I wish I would have poured more into our communication department. I wish I would have. I wish I would have invested more. When they would come to me and say, Pastor, we want you to be, have a weekly blog, or we want you to be on Facebook Live on a weekly basis. I mean, they would tell me this. I said, okay, well, let me do. And I wish I would have poured more into that, because I see now how effective that is. And it was effective back then. And so there was a large audience that I know in my ministry I was reaching effectively. Okay? And so this time is showing me that I need to pay attention to the people that are not there, right? And so the online thing. And then when I think about the church too, we always talk about departmental leaders, and we have this, sometimes it's duplication and so forth. Do you think, and I know the General Conference is moving in a direction now where what they're doing is they're looking at offices, they're looking at their structure, and they're beginning to reevaluate that. And so in my mind now, and let's just start from the church, what are some things, and Pastor Paul, you can chime in too, that we can look at again with fresh eyes, and say, wait a minute, is this necessary? Do we need to merge some things together? Do we need to, and when I say merge, if we have two churches, the same conference in the same area, and they're right 5 minutes away from each other, I mean, what's our strategic plan? Do we say, hey, we just need to plant more churches? Or do we need to say, okay, what are some things that we need to do so that maybe we can, put them in one? Or, I'm just thinking now. I'm thinking that we need to evaluate where we are. I think this crisis has called us, at least it's called me, to evaluate ministry, to evaluate what would be effective.
Dr. Henry just skipped the kiddie pool. He skipped the shallow end. He just took us right to the deep end. He just jumped in off the high dive, the 20-foot high dive. Wow. Oh, my goodness.
Listen, one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that church is not widgets and product. We can get fooled into thinking that the church is this product that you have to shape, and the church is an enigma that is shaped based on the people that are there, and it's the people that forces how a church is seen or is moving forward. And so with that in mind, it's not as simple as saying, hey, let's come together, because we have at this point about 150 years of doing it all by ourselves. And then all of a sudden now we're kind of forced into, let's reevaluate, let's bring together districts maybe that are out where I am now in the Mid-America Union. There are some churches that are 100 miles from each other. And doing church online is one thing, but doing
Right.
church together may be something else. And so leaders have to now don't just give up what they have done in the past to now look at this online opportunity to say, hey, we can do it together when this thing is over. We need to look and see what's the purpose, what are we gaining when we are doing it in our individual cities, and maybe
Mhm.
that may be where we need to begin to concentrate on, which may mean there may be some duplication as we go up the food chain. Because what I've realized is that I'm not duplicating what's done at the conference level. I am supporting what's done at the conference level. So if the conference level is not doing anything, whoa, how is it getting done? And how are you shaping it and preparing it to be used in the local church? Because if the local church isn't doing it, then I don't have a job. I need to get the local
Mhm.
church involved. And so even if I'm at the union level, I need to be pushing the conference level to make sure that it's pushed down to the local church, which then is pushed down to the community and the neighborhood.
Yeah. So like a resource, you're basically resourcing us and encouraging us, and I think that's effective because we definitely need motivation. Um, I'm also thinking too that we have a large population, and I'm assuming in North America, based on what I've been hearing from different people, of our younger generation that have not really bought in. From what I'm hearing, and maybe you all could shed some light on this for me, have not really bought into what we do as church. And so even with the tithe and offering, they they're not really sold on it like the older like the builder generation or so forth. And so reaching that segment of people with an effective way to do church, I think needs to be addressed. How do we reach that other generation that really is not sold on the structure, you know? But yet, how can we get them and include them into what we are doing? And even Pastor Paul, I know you have a church there in South Florida, and doing creative things over there. And in your experience, being a pastor, how have you reached that sector, that community, that target population? Have they bought? I mean, from your experience, have they bought into the church? and
Yeah. So that term I think needs some definition.
Okay.
When we say doing church, I think perhaps over the last 5, 10, 15 years, across North America at least, among our colleagues, we have already been wrestling and struggling with what that term actually means. Um, so that and for so many of us for so long, doing church, that term doing church, has defined what we do between 9:30 and 2 o'clock on a Saturday. Um, and if we're trying to redefine that, if that's what we're talking about, how do we make that relevant, or that how do we engage this crowd you're talking about in the 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock time period? Then that's one conversation. But in essence, that's a programming discussion for the most part. If we're going to widen that discussion and say that we're not defining church, or we're defining church as more than simply those hours between 9 and 2, then that's a discussion that I think involves a whole lot more than simply talking about, executing a well polished program that segments flow real nicely and tightly together. That the old discussions that we have. You're not going to put an usher on the door who can't smile. You're not going to put somebody up to sing who can't sing. All those kind of things. That's really for a long time. That's where our discussions about doing church have centered on, and it's been basically how do we make the show better. And we've got churches around the place who do great. And I'm sorry, I'm not castigating it, but we do great shows. There are places and churches that do great programming. There are others that don't. That just don't stream. And I've been there. I know that. I want to stream right now until we get some stuff together. But until we move the conversation from that stuff to the stuff that other demographic that you're talking about care about, because I think that no matter how well we do polish the programming, there's that younger demographic that knows that they're going to get better programming at the BET Awards. Programming is going to be more polished on some TV show or program that they're watching, and our churches just aren't resourced to be able to compete on a polished level with some of the stuff that they're getting in other sectors. So I think we've got to start looking to areas beyond just tightening up the program. Not saying that we don't do that, because we need to do that, but we've got to start looking to some of the other areas that are more meaningful and that have a greater impact on transforming the lives of both those that we're trying to reach and those who are doing the reaching.
Well, good point. And I think one of the things is not just wait and see what they're going to do. I think we need to invite them into the conversation and have them sit at the table and have them participate, not just take top down. The problem is that we like to do a lot of top down kind of church. As you were sharing about the timing, if it's just between 9:30 and 2, that's just an opportunity. That's not church. Church is more than that. Church is when the rubber meets the road, when you get out into the community, when you're hearing people's plight and you're providing a service for that plight, and the response of the service is the worship. And then we also know, and within the word, that service is worship. So it's more than just 9:30 to 2. We make joke about it. Sabbath is all day long. We always say we can't wait for the Sabbath to end. Sabbath is all day long. And I think a lot of our churches now are finding themselves caught in the fact that they've only been focused on a 9 to 2 service, as opposed to open 7 days a week. As opposed, we tend to say you're the Seventh Day Adventist as opposed to 7 days Adventist. So I think we now have to look at worship differently, because when we're online, it's not the same. When we're reaching out to the members, the older members, trying to do a generational online service, we go out of our way to make sure that the older folks are there. We go out of our way to make sure that they can get the tithe in or their offerings in, whether it's by Cash App, or it's by email, or by push pay, or whatever we do, or even simple old put it in the mail. We will go to the post office and get it. We are willing to do all those things, whereas before we thought they just come to us and they get a show. And now we've got to really do some work to really make it. And it's funny, this reminds me of the temple service that was happening in the Old Testament, where the people showed up and the doves were there. You bought the doves while you're there. You traded right there because the temple only took a certain. This thing is so biblical. It's scary, and God says if we don't know our history, we sure gonna repeat it.
So again, we're talking about ministry in these times. We're talking about how this will shape from this time forward. What can we do differently? How can we bring people along a generation along that it seems and appears wasn't did not buy into what we were doing. Right? It appears that way, and so just in your thoughts now, how do you think this pandemic will impact the local church, the union, the general conference? I know from a financial standpoint, we understand that. Okay, so we get that. But how will it impact us? And will this, again, just your thoughts, will this pandemic challenge us to make some decisive decisions on doing things differently if need be? And I'll give you one example. So with the general conference, they were supposed to have the general conference July 2020 in Indianapolis, right? They had to cancel that. They put it to next year, May. All right, so we're already talking about a different time. And then, from my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, they're limiting the delegates. Okay? I mean, they're limiting the people that can come. Only delegates and family. I mean, that's what I heard. I think
You're right.
that. So now it has impacted the general conference. Now, is it just for this year? Or for the next year? Are they going to go back to the same old? When I say same old, are they going to go back to the same thing in 2025 if time still lasts? So we know that this pandemic has impacted at least our general conference. What do you think this pandemic, or how do you think this pandemic is going to impact our conferences, not from a financial standpoint, our unions and our churches? What are some things do you think we are going to really take another look at as we go forward?
Pastor Wade, before you respond to that, I want to put this comment by John Mills back up on the screen. I had put it up earlier. I don't know if you guys can see that. It says conference offices should be more flexible with what they allow pastors to use evangelism funds for. I think that's germane to the question that Dr. Henry just asked.
Now, I have to be honest with you. There are some conferences to this day, on this day, that allow churches to be more more flexible, if that's the word that John uses. But they have allowed evangelism to be something that's unique for a particular local area. And then those evangelism funds can be used there. So I don't think that they need to be more that way. I think what we need to do is really look at how we are really using evangelism funds. Are we forced to do it the old way? I mean, when I got to Oakwood, E.E. Cleveland was still alive, and his public evangelism course was being taught by E.E. Cleveland. So I sat at the feet of the man who wrote the script. And while sitting there, I have to be honest with you, I actually challenged myself. Some of these things ain't gonna work today, and that was in the 90s. But yet still, the people who he was preaching to, even then, it was working. People were still coming to Christ. The bottom line is the gospel is still the gospel. So today now, when we can't get together 10 people at a time, how are we going to get it out? We're going to have to go to a platform like this. So the first thing that's going to be changed is worship. Local church worship is changed. When we go back into the building, not only are you going to be preaching to the 10 or the 50 that come to the first service, come on now. If many pastors want to have multiple services, they're going to get it this time. The 10 to 15 people that are going to come to the first service, you're still going to be preaching or having service to those who are going to join online, because you have already whet their appetite now, and you can't now cut it off and say, well, come to church. All of a sudden now, it's going to be your worship that's of the people who are there and who are online. I had a pastor friend who shared with me some time ago, when this online worship idea was happening, a few churches were doing it. They were getting folks who were joining churches here in the United States, but there were people who were joining from Africa and around the world, and they wanted to join the church. They wanted to become members of the church here in the United States. And so that became a problem because that became the next question. How does someone join the church from another country, and how do you minister to that person there? So that becomes, now that question is going to become, that may be a change in the manual, where now we are ministering not just to the local church. Small groups are going to change. It may become now Zoom rooms, maybe a word that's going to be added to the manual. Local church gathering is changing because of COVID-19. We're not going to be able to connect anymore. And even how they are planning to open up the states here in the United States, you need to start off with continued social distancing. I call it physical distancing because we sure are social online. So if the physical distancing is what's going to be changing. And so you start with a small group, 10, then next 14 days, if you're able to manage, you can have maybe groups of 50 and maybe even groups of 150 and so on and so on. It's going to take a while. I don't know if churches will get back to 500 and 600 coming to church because everyone's going to be a little bit concerned. So the key is worship is going to change, number one. I think there are some churches that are being hurt by the giving, and there are some churches that are being blessed by this, because you have a group of folks who are now saying, "Ooh, I don't have to put on my clothes to go give my money. I can just push the button." And so they have seen an uptick in giving, based on the fact that you can give electronically now. Churches that were against it are now able to do it easily. I remember when one of the churches I pastored, and we brought the electronic giving to the church. We had a number of members said, "Nah, that is not going to work. That's not going to work." And now it's the only, right now, a lot of people, that's the only way they can give. So I think that things are going to change. You brought up a point earlier in terms of where the conferences and the union levels are going to be. Um, in the union I'm at, we try not to duplicate what is happening in the local conference level. And that seems to work in terms of helping to keep ministries happening. That's gonna be the thing now. I don't think it's an issue about duplication. I think it's an issue about human resources in how you manage that. So in other words, I'm the ACS director for the Mid America Union. I manage the ACS directors in the conferences, and they work with their churches. But my role is not to do their job, but my role is to resource and encourage the conference level leaders, and that helps them to do their job. People want to know that they are making a difference. People always want to know that they mean something, they have purpose, and that's my role, is to help them be focused and help them to meet the needs of what they're doing there in their local churches.
Well, one thing I can say definitely, Pastor Wade, you have been very resourceful to our church and to the ministry. And I'm not just saying that facetiously. I mean, you have been a blessing, a resourcing, and doing some things on the cutting edge. And so we appreciate that. I think that this time, again, will we get back to the 500, the 1,000? I don't know. When the vaccine, if the vaccine comes, is here. Some say 18 months. Some say, they're working on it now. I don't know. But when that comes and people start to gather again, they may gather, or it may be, as you said, there still may be some type of, I don't know. I just can't do it again. I'm not too sure what it's going to look like. But what I do know is this. I think, and I still stand on this, that we as leaders of the church, of the local church, of the union, in different levels, we have to, and I think we're doing this now, but we got to reevaluate. We got to reevaluate where we are. We can't do it the same way that we've been doing it before. And I believe also that as we move forward, even in this time, we can lean on some of the lessons from the past of these great leaders and what they've done and how they have been progressive even in difficult times. And so again, reevaluating the church, seeing where we are, seeing. I like what you said again about being a resource to the churches, and also, and I also like what you said about making sure in the Mid American Union. We talk about the Mid American Union, that there is a conscientious effort not to duplicate. That's important.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Pastor Henry Duckingham, you're in the Mid America Union, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see what's going on here. I see that. Now I see this connection.
Hey,
I gotta
man, what
get
you got?
somebody from the Southern Union up in this joint. Where we at?
What
Hey,
you got?
hey,
Next week.
to be honest with
There's
you,
lovely people in the Southern Union.
listen, to
Lovely.
be honest with you, the Southern Union is leading the charge in how they support and resource. And let me be honest, they resource
Yeah.
their local conferences and their local churches.
Right.
So it's not a Mid America Union thing. This is what the union does. It really resources the local conferences. If the conference is not doing what it's supposed to do, then that's where the bottleneck happens.
Sure.
The union is not there to take the place, but the union is there to support the local conference and help them to move ministry forward. Because that conference leader, man, he has what? In some conferences, 100 and something churches. That's a lot of churches. So you have a union that supports them.
Listen, I
Now,
want to highlight something that I saw one of our pastors put up, and we're grateful to have pastors. A lot of pastors participate in this conversation. So I'm watching. I know you guys might not see this, but some of the conversation that's coming in the chat. This one that I'm putting up on the screen came a few minutes back. From Pastor James Johnson. I believe he's pastoring in the Florida conference in the Orlando area, Apopka, I believe. He says, our church is reconnecting by thinking small and not prioritizing the program. The family is broken into networked small churches to care for each other, their kids, youth, etc. We should have done that already, but this has been a great wake up. I love it. I like it. I think that that's a great approach, particularly in this context. And I would. It almost feels like, and I'm gonna probably get into some trouble here, but when it comes to, and by the way, Pastor Johnson, we actually went to high school together at one of our academies, so I know him. But Pastor Johnson pastors in a state conference. It's going to get a little messy for a second here. And what he's talking about, this small groups thing, the small group concept, when it started kind of taking off, maybe about 15, 20 years ago or so, that the black church seemed to be way on the tail end of wanting to engage that, while the Anglo church or state conferences seem to be much more moving in that direction a little bit quicker than we were. Is there something in the development of the context of what's happening now that is going to be different between our traditionally black churches and our Anglo churches or black conferences, white conferences? Is what we're going through right now in this COVID and all this kind of stuff? Do we expect to see different repercussions in some churches than in another? And I'll throw this out there. I got a call on day before yesterday, from a former member of mine who is in the, I'm not going to say it, is in another conference, but it's a state conference now. And she said something to me that I was startled by it. She said that in their prayer meeting call on the other night, that they had the pastor on the line and 2 other members.
Mm-hmm.
That blew me, because it's like every other pastor church that I'm talking to, our numbers have grown exponentially during this time for our Sabbath school prayer meeting crowds, because of people who are participating in either conference calls or on Zoom meetings like this. But this was the first time that I'm hearing that an audience They only had 3 people, and she was so concerned about it. She was calling and asking if I could give her any tips or anything like that on how to boost that. I haven't seen anything like that. I was talking to another friend of mine just across the street, pastors across the street, and he said they did their church service on last Sabbath from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. prayer thing all day long. By the end of the day, they had 52,000 views. This is a church of about 1,100, 1,200 members. And by the end of a day, not 5,000, 52,000. His prayer meeting during that week, or this week, he said he had 1,200 people watching online or live for their prayer meeting. But then by the next morning, he had 5,000 people who had tuned into the prayer meeting. I'm curious. What are we seeing? Those kind? I thought that all over we were pretty much seeing maybe not those numbers, but at least some boost. Is there a difference that we're going to see? And Roger, you work in the union. You see some regional conference and some state conference. What are you hearing? Are you seeing anything that's different in how we are managing and engaging this time?
Well, some conferences hadn't done anything at first, and folks were kind of. And what I heard the word was that most of the online ministry needed to be done at the local church level. So the local church was given space to develop what they wanted to do. Then we have a few higher ups, conference levels, who do some things to engage. And so when they did that, it was like, wow, this is great. Our conference is doing something. Our conference is engaging. We have one conference who started with a prayer line, and then on the prayer line, one of the people on the prayer line owned a radio station. And they then say, hey, this needs to be on the radio. And they gave the conference prayer line free radio time. And it just exponentially grew in terms of ministry now is given an opportunity to grow. So some churches are doing well with it. Some churches are seeing a transition. Conferences are doing, folks are getting excited about it. But the key thing is, it's called a relationship. We're back to that. Even though I am far away, even though I'm physical distancing, it's the relationship that makes the difference.
Right.
Am I willing to sit down and listen to someone I don't know? Am I willing to sit down and listen to someone who, when we were able to connect, we didn't connect? All of a sudden now, why would I waste my time? Look, see, I am now, the individual now has the power to make the choice of what they listen to and what they participate in. And if I wasn't participating with you when we could have connected, it's going to be hard sell for me to connect with you now. But if I was in some way, if our local members are reaching out to their local members and they're reaching out to their friends, their family, and everyone touch somebody, that number grows. And I believe that's what we need to see happen. That the relationships that we have developed are reaching out to relationships that are developed. So pastors, it's not just having the service on, it's also what are you doing in between that Saturday service or that Wednesday service? Are you calling your people? Are you sending a text message? Are you blasting an email? Those are the things that makes the difference in how many views you have.
Here's a statement that I think kind of helps us to contextualize some of what we're talking about too. This is from Thelma Mundy. She is one of the teachers at my school, at New Hope School, and she says this. She says, "Happy Sabbath." Oh, I lost it. "Happy Sabbath, pastors. I'm appreciative of the discussion, very relevant. The paradigm has definitely shifted, but I'm not sure if the situation in which we find ourselves will be permanent." And then she continues, she says, "When pandemics were experienced in former years, I'm sure similar discussions were taking place. But as soon as the dust settled, things gradually went back to normal. Now, Roger, you were part of a conversation that I think we were on Facebook earlier this week, where I had made some statements, and I saw you were part of that. And so, I got some beef with this scenario, not with what she said, but I'm agreeing with her. And my beef is that I think that we have an opportunity to shift some paradigms that really needed to be shifted. That's what Dr. Henry said at the beginning when we started. But my fear is that in many cases, we've just jumped into doing the same stuff online that we were doing in the buildings. And there are many churches across North America and the world who the stuff that we were doing in our buildings wasn't particularly effective, wasn't really relevant. Our numbers were dwindling. People were choosing to go other places. Income resources was dwindling. And particularly in those contexts, if all we're doing is taking what we were doing in the building and now doing it online, two things. While we've seen that a boost in numbers for most of us in viewership, even when we've just been doing the same thing, generally that has happened because of three reasons. Number one, it's happened because just the context. We can't be in the building, so people are going there. Two, it's new, it's novel, it's, and then three, there's always this knee-jerk fear reaction to things like pandemics, which is, I think, what Sister Mundy was getting at. We have this knee-jerk. We're going to all that the Lord said we're going to do because we don't want to die from COVID-19. And then when it feels like we're not going to die from COVID-19, then we get back to normal. And so my fear is that while we have an opportunity to really address some of the things that were already problematic before this situation, that now we're the longer this goes, I think as Sister Mundy is saying, the longer this goes, the fear factor is going to plateau. And so we're just going to get back to normal. So I can almost guarantee you that in 4 months, and let's say 8 weeks, 10 weeks from now, if Sister Mundy is right, then in 10 weeks from now, and we're still in this situation where we can't be in our buildings, then I could almost guarantee you that the viewership that we have that looked like it way up here, it will eventually plateau, and then it will begin to dive if we have not changed the paradigm.
But yes, but what we also have now, in comparison to what we have had in the past, is that you have a different kind of pastor who lead in the local churches. Whereas in the past, we had pastors who were, for lack of a better word, very system-oriented, where now you have a lot of young pastors who are out-of-the-box thinkers, young pastors who are connected, who are more like the younger generation. So you have pastors now, especially in some of our traditional churches, our churches who have done it for so many years this way. They now have an opportunity in these last 3 weeks to say to those churches, hey, we need to do this. Hey, we need to do that. Hey, we need to do this. And all of a sudden now, churches are doing things they would have never done before, because now their pastor is giving them leadership, how to be on Instagram, how to be on Facebook, how to get that YouTube channel up and running. And so if we begin to revert back, if all of a sudden the fear goes down, hopefully there is enough stake put into the ground so that this new way of doing church is kept, and it's a different look coming out of the pandemic.
I'm sure that people will start to revert to doing things as normal. But my hope is that for those who are serious about the coming of the Lord, for those who are serious about doing whatever we can so that we can be effective, my hope is that this situation is a wake-up call where leaders can evaluate again their productivity, what's productive, what's important. And I think that this is a way for all of our churches to kind of galvanize together and have this shared community where we're talking about different ideas on how to do things effectively. You know what's different, I think? Well, every pandemic is a little different, right? This pandemic definitely is different from H1N1. And it's a little different, okay? And I think because, of course, the magnitude of it and because of the things that it has affected all over, right? So I think it's a little different. But my hope is that what we can do going forward is learn now to reach out and have more of a community shared leadership, okay? I think that this one, hopefully, will teach us that we cannot do this thing alone. If we can take a page from the government, right, and see where some of the missteps were, right, we don't want the church to be the same way. And I also want to beg to say this. Maybe this might be a time that we can also reach out to other faith leaders. I'm not saying that we need to, merge our doctrines, right?
Wait, what?
Right.
Wait,
But we can. And let me say this. Leaders in the past, I'm talking about our we want to say forefathers or pioneers, they've done this. They reached out to other faith leaders. They have.
To do what again?
To do mission. And so some of the things that we do now.
Wait, what kind? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, let me continue.
Yeah, you got to break that down for me because I.
Let me break it down for you, Richard. Let me break it down. So some of the things that we do now, it didn't originate with the pioneers. In fact, most of all the things, if you really think about it, they reached out. And so this AY, they reached out, and we got that from the other faith churches. Okay, and so I think this is the time now where we're talking about mission. And today, I preached the message on it was on Revelation 14 that God speaks in different positions, right? And so we worked that text in Revelation 14. The Lamb was standing, and God preaches as He's standing. He's the Lamb. And we went on with that. He said God also used the angels and to fly. And so God preaches the message as the angels are flying, and there's a different aspect of flying. And then at the end of the chapter, it says that one sat down. And so God preaches the message when He sits down. So there's different ways that God, gives this message out, and we need to be, true to our message. And still, we need to reach out to other people, faith leaders, so that we can continue with mission. And I hope that
you're 100% right. Mission should drive everything. Mission drives the budget. Mission drives the opportunities. Mission drives what we do. I just saw right here on screen where someone asked about how are other churches doing communions. See, when I say we're impacted by this as a church, local. Never in all the years I've been a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, never thought I would do communion in my house.
Wow.
Never. I never thought that'll happen. I never thought that was going to ever happen before Jesus comes. Matter of fact, it's this concept of being in a place where things are not going the way you expected. Now I have to rethink as a pastor. How do I minister? Now I became the priest of my home, and I had communion with my family.
I want to cut you real quick, but can you imagine how 2 years ago, if you brought that to your church and say, listen, this Sabbath, what we're going to do Sabbath afternoon, everybody's going to do communion at the house. And I know the manual says that it's the ordained
job. That's what I'm saying. All of a sudden, everybody became communion bread aficionados. They knew how to make communion bread. They knew what they had to do for the grape wine. They just went down, got a Welch's. But what I'm saying is that all of a sudden, matter of fact, when I looked online, I saw some pastors had wine glass, some had big glasses, some had the small one. So what I'm saying is that we what we have done, what the pandemic has done, is taken the traditional things that we held sacred, and we all of a sudden realized what was important. It was the relationship. It was the meaning of what it meant, and not the fact that we had to go through this whole ceremony in white robes and breaking the bread and can't touch the table. And all that went out the window, because the key thing was we wanted to celebrate what God did for us at the table. That's what was important. And so I think that is where we talked about what is going to be different. Hopefully, it is that we will see things for what it really is, and what's the meaning in it, the relevance in it for the relationships of what's happening right now. So if I don't get to church on time, dressed in a certain way, it don't matter. Thank God I'm at church. Thank God I made a moment and I stepped into the building, or maybe drove by the building. But we may be having church, drive-through church, in the future. You just don't know.
Just for a little bit. We want the crowd to come back again, man. And I think we went past our time, Pastor Paul. What I would say is this, again, and I want to just beat this, over the head. I think that it's a time for us to really reevaluate, and I think that we can learn a lot, from people in different positions and so forth, and also go back in our history and see how some of our forefathers and how they the challenge of a crisis. How do they do it? How do they meet the challenge of a crisis? And although this is different, yes, this is a pestilence, right? And the others were pestilences too. But how do they meet the challenge of those crises? So we talk about like the E.C. Ward, the Charles Bradford, all these great preachers and people, how they were able to move on the trying times in which they were living in. How do they meet the challenge? And I think we need to take a page from that and move forward. I think that this church will change. I think it's going to change from a structural standpoint. I think they're going to make some significant changes. I think we didn't talk about the economy and all that, but I do think that even when things go back, and we're praying, that it goes back to at least, where we had it before. I think they're going to take a look at all of this. And given the age range of people that are going to be eligible for retirement, in the next 2-3 years, okay, I think that this church will change from a structural standpoint. And my plea to those who are in church leadership, and when I say church, not even the pastors, but even members that are leading departments and so forth, my plea is that we take a look at and reevaluate where we are and what God is telling us to do. Let's get on top of the curve. Let's not get behind the eight ball. All the time, a lot of times we're always, behind, but let's get on top of it now, because God is doing something special.
Okay. All right. Great discussion, guys. We've run out of time, and so we are getting ready to wrap this up. I'm excited about continuing having these conversations. For those of you that have joined us, you had some great feedback today. I know we didn't get to all of your questions or all of your comments, but as we develop this, and we're still kind of getting used to watching the camera and watching the screen and getting the comments and reading them and doing all that, but we're going to keep doing this on the weekend. I trust you, we'll get better at it, at being able to field your questions and your comments and all of the things that are involved with that. So we want you to join us again next Sabbath afternoon at 4 o'clock. We're going to continue pieces of this conversation. I'm looking at Pastor Juan Rodriguez. He is the youth director for our Florida conference. I'm trying to get him to join us on next week. A number of others we've tried to get to be a part of this. So we hope that this has been edifying for you, that you've been able to get some wheels turning to ideas. We know we didn't give you this is how it's done or this is the answer, but we hope that we're getting you in the mindset of being able to just to think of some things in a little different way, and to begin to process some stuff that needs to be done. What's going on with our music here? All right. We'll fix that. But again, join us next week. Thank you so much for joining us, Pastor Roger Wade, Mid-America Union. Thank you so much, Pastor Dion Henry. Thank you again so very much, Doc. We will see everybody on next Sabbath. God bless you.
Take care now. God bless.
God bless.